Support for this News from Lake Wobegon podcast comes from the Sleep Number bed by Select Comfort, the bed that lets you adjust the mattress firmness to your preference, your sleep number. Well, it's Holy Week in Lake Wobegon, Monday, Thursday, and Good Friday, and Saturday, and Easter Sunday. Everybody down to Ralph's Pretty Good Grocery there to get their bone-in ham, $2.39 a pound. And all the potatoes that you might need, including the new potatoes, if that's what your taste runs to, and daffodils by the bunch. People down there shopping for their big Easter dinner. As it says in Scripture, consider the lilies, how they grow, they toil not and they spin not. And yet I say unto you that Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. So amazing to have flowers in Lake Wobegon. Where do they come from? Not from us. Come from some foreign land. Texas, maybe. They raise lilies down in Texas? I'm not sure. That's a different picture of Texas than the one I have. It says in the Song of Solomon, behold, my beloved, come into the garden and the beds of spices to feed among the lilies. They have lilies there in Ralph's Pretty Good Grocery, and they have feed too. They sell you feed. Some of it comes from the gardens, some from the feed lot. Spices, not a whole lot. You don't need so much for ham, cloves mainly, and mustard. Last year, Viola Torres put rum all over her Easter ham and made the mistake of putting it on after she had baked it. It was rather dry and it absorbed a great deal of rum, and of course it was too late to call the thing back then. That was the Easter when they sang a lot at the table. She came back this last week, Viola Torres. She is the president of the Altar Guild, and so a very responsible person at Lake Wobegon Lutheran Church. Came back from California, where she had been over Palm Sunday, without one word of explanation for those strange phone calls she made to people back in Lake Wobegon from Northern California, riding in a car. Someone else was driving. The radio was playing music we don't associate with Viola. There was an odd sound in her voice. An odd sound. She made no explanation whatsoever for that phone call or for the one on Monday night from a hotel somewhere in the Napa Valley. She sounded that we could hear water running from some kind of hot tub or something, and she sounded as if she had been to several wine tastings that day and had drunk the whole thing, had forgotten to spit out the samples. And there was a tone in her voice. You can tell when Lutherans call on the phone and they're naked. That was the tone in her voice. Little bit higher pitched, little tense, little giddy. Almost like they're on some kind of gas. Talking a little bit fast. We could tell she was naked and she was with somebody. But she came back on Wednesday, not a word of explanation. You have a good time in California? Oh, yeah, I had a good time. So what did you do? Well, did a lot of things. Went up to the Napa Valley and went to vineyards and, went shopping. You know me. I guess we don't. I don't think so. I guess we don't. As a result of her being gone, the planning for Easter was thrown off at Lake Wobegon Lutheran. It was Thursday when the street cleaner came through, and there was no parking on Main Street, and the street cleaner came through from the county highway department, and there was a crowd to watch this. This only happens once or twice a year in Lake Wobegon. The big street cleaner came through with the big circular brushes, and he never has an audience like this, so he did some donuts and so forth. Then after he cleaned off the street, the paint truck came through, and it painted a beautiful, bright yellow stripe right down the middle of Main Street. People just stood around and watched it dry. It was just a beautiful yellow thing. And then Marilyn Hedlund said, "Oh my God," the yellow reminded her that nobody had gone and bought the eggs yet for the Easter breakfast, the egg-baked breakfast at Lake Wobegon Lutheran Church, because Viola had been out of town. She hadn't put together the egg-bake committee for the big Sunday morning breakfast. People are counting on this. People go to church hungry, counting on having some breakfast after either the 7:30 or the 9 o'clock or the 10:30 a.m. service to go down into the basement and have some eggs and sausage. She went down to Ralph's Pretty Good Grocery. He was down to his last 10 dozen eggs, limit of 1 dozen per customer, so she had to get into her car and drive into St. Cloud and go to the Chow Barn, the big grocery warehouse, where she got 80 dozen eggs, and she got 40 pounds of sausage, and she got 15 pounds of coffee. And there she ran into Arlene Bunsen, who was embarrassed to be seen shopping at the Chow Barn. You're not supposed to buy your food there. You're supposed to buy it at Ralph's Pretty Good Grocery. He's your neighbor. You're supposed to shop at home. She looked embarrassed. She said, "Well, Ralph was all out of mint jelly," she said. Well, nobody serves mint jelly with ham, or a thin excuse. So right away, Arlene Bunsen volunteered to be on the egg bake committee. "Oh, no," Marilyn said, "that's all right. I can take care of it. It's no problem whatsoever." She drove back to the church with the 80 dozen eggs in the back seat, driving very slowly over the railroad tracks, and got back to Lake Wobegon, and she decided she better break those eggs and get that egg bake started. She went down into the kitchen and she started to break 80 dozen eggs and get the rest of the ingredients, the cheese and all the rest together, and the peppers and so forth, and the mushrooms and things that people count on having, and started to divide up the sausage into little patties. Judy Inkvist came down and said, "Do you need some help?" No, Marilyn said, "No, I'm fine. I can take care of this. It'll only take me a few hours, and then I'm supposed to be in on the Easter Vigil, and that'll be right after the Friday night service. I'm supposed to have 2 hours." "No, that's fine. No need." There was a tone in her voice, the tone of martyrdom in her voice, which Lutherans are susceptible to. A people who are brought up not to complain, to do your part, even if other people do not do their part. And take upon yourself the holy martyrdom of the kitchen women. Turn down offers to help and suffer, and turn this act of sacrifice into an act of monumental pride. Very much in the spirit of Lutheran women. Holy martyrdom. Don't worry about me. I am just fine. I am just going to put the clothes into the washer, and I'm going to fix a little supper for my family and tell the heathen barbarians out on the front lawn to keep the fire going. I'll be out there in just a moment. And they don't need to worry about rope. I have rope of my own, and I will tie myself to the post to be burned alive. It's not a problem. Don't go to any trouble. I will tie myself to the post just as soon as I get my spice rack in order. And I plan my family's menu for this next week. This happened last Easter at church. There was some snafu, and Cindy Headland was there, and for some reason she was left alone to make the egg bake, and also to have 6 hours of the Easter Vigil until Saturday noon. And people finally found her down in the kitchen Saturday evening. She was kind of swaying back and forth on her feet, and her hair was pasted to her head, and she was exhausted, and she was sick. But she said, "I'm all right. I'm all right." There was a kind of a faint golden aura that surrounded her head. People had to finally drag her away and take her home and lock her in her bedroom. So Marilyn was there and breaking the eggs in the basement Saturday morning for the egg bake at the Lutheran church, and Judy Inkvist insisted on helping her, and then Viola Torres walked in. Viola Torres, who was supposed to have made the cinnamon buns for the Easter breakfast. Well, she hadn't. And they knew why she hadn't. She had started to make them, and she had put them in the oven. And then she had gone into the living room and turned on the TV and poured herself a healthy glass of Bailey's Irish cream. And she had watched TV for a while and had a few more glasses of Bailey's. Meanwhile, the cinnamon buns caught on fire, and the volunteer fire department had to go up there to the house and put out the fire. And here she was, a couple of hours later, come down to the church, having failed her every obligation. She walked down into the church in a tan raincoat. They looked at her. They weren't sure she had any clothes on underneath. She smelled of Bailey's Irish cream. And she had that terrible sort of casual look about her that people who've drunk a lot of Bailey's Irish cream have. "Can I help?" she said, having failed to do everything that had been expected of her. No. No, it's fine. You go home." She smelled of smoke. "You go home and you just lie down and rest. You must be exhausted after your week in California," they said, wondering exactly what she had done that would exhaust her. And who was that man that she was with? She watched them break eggs for a while. This woman who looked to be about 3 sheets to the wind, hardly capable of putting Pop-Tarts into a toaster, let alone making cinnamon rolls. She reached into her pocket and she pulled out a cigarette and she lit it. They couldn't remember when they'd ever seen anyone smoke a cigarette in the Lutheran church. They never knew that she smoked. She lit the cigarette, and then they noticed that her lipstick was a shade of red they'd never seen on her before. Her hair was pulled back. It had some kind of a wax on it that gave it a just got out of bed look. She took a drag on her cigarette and she said, "You people have never understood me. Ever. I went out to California and I realized I've been trying to be somebody I'm not all of my life. I've been trying to be a Minnesotan. I'm a Californian. I realize that's who I am now. It took me this long. I'm 55 years old, and I just realized who I am." She took a drag on the cigarette and exhaled a great expressive cloud of smoke. She said he was a windsurfer. He was a professional windsurfer named Russ. He was younger. He was tan. He was athletic. He was a beautiful man. Somehow we were meant for each other. I just wish I'd discovered it 20 years before. He took me windsurfing on San Francisco Bay. He was a Lutheran, but a different kind of Lutheran. The Lutheran church is not based on guilt and fear out there. I went to Palm Sunday at his church. It was a clothing-optional Lutheran church. All I had were the palms. And for a while I covered myself with them, and then I held them above my head, and we marched around the church. I suddenly realized who I am. People you've known all your life can be meaner than skunks, and people you've just met yesterday can be the kindest people in the world. I found that out in California, and as soon as I can sell my house, I'm going to go straight back there and spend the rest of my life and never come back here. Then she looked and saw that it had turned dark outside. There was a chill outside. And she saw snow falling just outside the window. That was this afternoon. That's why that snow fell today. Because she said what she said. And she realized it. She said, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean that about the skunks." She said, "I'm drunk." They said, you better go home and lie down. You lie down and have a good rest. And we'll come up tomorrow morning, Easter morning, and we'll bring you some egg bake and some cinnamon buns. We'll make the cinnamon buns tonight. Don't worry about it. We'll bring you some coffee. We'll bring you breakfast. You just go home and have a good rest. She walked up the hill to her house and she crawled into bed, the house still smelling of smoke. She lay there in the dark. She could put them out of her mind, but she couldn't put her mother out of her mind. Your mother follows you the rest of your life, especially when you're alone. Her mother talked to her, and you can never put your mother's voice out of your head. It's always there. It'll be there the rest of your life. She could hear her mother as if her mother were sitting on the edge of the bed. Her mother said, going across San Francisco Bay naked on a surfboard under a sail? What were you thinking? Who do you think you are? Well, that's the question, isn't it? That's the news from Lake Wobegon, where all the women are strong, all the men are good looking, and all the children are above average.